Okay, so now I've hit record. So we're going to record this, make it available for people after the fact. So that is that. And of course, as I mentioned, we are now in the middle, right in the middle of PRSA Midwest District's week. We're having a virtual conference this week called Turning the Corner. All attendees today on this session will remain in listen-only mode throughout the event. So, again, please stay on mute. If you want to have your video on, go for it, but that's fine. You don't need to. I'm sure your presenters and hosts will. If you have questions for us today at any time, please submit them via the chat box. And again, if you're having technical problems, private message me. Moving on now, we're nearing the 2-year anniversary already. Actually, I think it was just today, I saw a note this morning that said that the first COVID-19 case was diagnosed 2 years ago today. Many of us assumed by now that we'd see the coronavirus and its impact on our personal and professional lives, well, at least for the most part, behind us. But instead, more people need to get vaccinated, and the discussion about working from home and going back to the office continues. Our panelists today will share information that you will need to be healthier, improve your performance at work, and your overall quality of life. Working from home, and returning to office life also will be covered. So we're glad you're here. Our moderator today is Dave Nuger, APR, the founder, president, and CEO of Nuger. Dave is our chapter's president-elect. Congrats, Dave. We'll be inducting you properly in another year or so of the past president's group. Dave will be beginning his duties as chapter leader next month. He's a 35-year veteran of the communications field, and he has significant experience both client side and agency side in PR marketing communications. Throughout his career, Dave has emphasized targeted communication strategies in areas such as corporate comms, media relations, issues management, crisis communications, strategic planning, and as I said, marketing communications. Dave, please take it away.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here this morning. Glad to be with you. Glad you could make it to be with us. This morning's event features 3 Minnesota-based experts. Our panelists are Anna Lynn of the Children and Family Division of the Minnesota Department of Health, Leonard Lee, principal at Perfectense and former NPR reporter, and Jennifer Hellman, COO and Principal and incoming CEO, she'll start in January at Goff Public. I think you're really going to enjoy this morning's panel discussion and find it very worthwhile. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to each of our panelists so you can ooh and ah over their credentials, because they are really 3 impressive professionals. I will start with Anna. Anna is Anna's focus as mental health promotion coordinator for the Minnesota Department of Health is advancing a public health approach to mental health well-being and resilience, particularly through policy and community engagement. Minnesota has developed a public health framework for action and emerging mental health well-being narrative to advance public discourse about mental well-being and increasing the opportunity for investment and promotion and prevention. Anna was a member of the first cohort of 25 ACE community resilience coaches and is committed to supporting community and system responses to trauma. She has a background in mental health policy, community organizing, and data analysis. She also served as research analyst at the Minnesota Department of Human Services for 10 years. Anna, we're glad you're here with us. Leonard Lynn has been a public relations practitioner for more than 20 years. He is a former senior account executive at Weber Shandwick and former business reporter at Minnesota Public Radio. As a freelancer, he has worked with companies from the Fortune 100 to Silicon Valley startups. Over the past year, Leonard has been helping companies communicate their remote working and employee wellness initiatives to both internal and external audiences. And I have to say, I'm kind of jealous of Leonard because he's been at this for nearly as long as I have, but he's aged so much more gracefully. Leonard, we're glad you're here.
Thank you, Dave.
Jennifer Hellman is the incoming president and CEO of Goff Public. a Minnesota-based PR and public affairs firm. You might have read about Jennifer and the agency embracing a new normal in the September issue or September edition of Minneapolis St. Paul Business Journal. Jennifer is a highly sought after expert in reputation management, crisis consulting and preparedness, media relations, and strategic communications. She has 2 decades of experience helping clients navigate difficult situations, serving as a trusted behind the scenes advisor on many high profile stories and issues. As Goff Public's lead media trainer and spokesperson coach, Jennifer has trained thousands of business and community leaders on how to work with the media and deliver effective and authentic messages. I'm especially glad to invite Jennifer to the panel because, truth be told, Goff Public and Nuga are competitors. And today, we get to model the term friendly competitors, which I think our world needs more of. I think the world of Jennifer, and I've just gotten to get to know her a little better, and she is truly terrific. So Jennifer, it really is great to have you with the panel as well. Excuse me. Now, here's a quick rundown of today's event. The panel will begin in just a few minutes. Q&A will begin around 10:10, and you can put your questions in the chat at any time, and we'll get to them around 10:10. And then we'll wrap up the event and have you on your way no later than 10:30. I'm going to pause for a drink here. So, I'd like to thank Jake Sturgis, Minnesota PRSA Board Liaison for the Professional Development and Networking Committee, and Amy Franti, Chair of the committee, for planning this webinar. They have both been exceptional in their volunteer work for the Minnesota chapter, not only for this event, but throughout the year. As the current president-elect and soon to be president of Minnesota PRSA, I would be remiss if I didn't take just a moment to invite you to join PRSA if you're not already a member in the Minnesota chapter. The coming year is already shaping up nicely. I invite you to reach out to me later for more details on becoming a PRSA member. I hope you can join us. Now, here's where I want to recognize our sponsors. And the first one's a little awkward, and you'll understand why in just a moment. I'd like to thank Nuger for being an annual Diamond sponsor. Actually, Nuger is extraordinarily proud to be an annual Diamond sponsor. The chapter does so much for our profession, and we are happy to lend our support with both dollars and time. I invite you all to do the same. I want to extend a big thank you to our other annual sponsors as well. They are Emerald sponsors, Brandpoint and Weber Shandwick, and Sapphire sponsor, Padilla. Each has been loyal sponsors through the years, and we appreciate all of them. So let's get the ball rolling. It's been said that if you don't take time for wellness, then you'll be forced to make time for illness. So I commend you all for being here, because our 3 experts will provide great insights in the next 75 minutes ahead. I applaud you for taking time for your wellness. I'll remind you that if you have questions as you listen to our panelists, please put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to get them at the end of the panel discussion. If you're having technical difficulties, privately chat with Jason Springer. So Jennifer, I'm going to start with you, and I drew their names randomly for all of you to know, so they're coming up in the order I drew them. Jennifer, I'm going to start with you. How has the pandemic changed the way we look at work-life balance, and what has it meant for you personally, for your business, and for your friends and family?
Thanks, Dave, and I appreciate the intro about being competitors. That's something I'm even looking at differently post-pandemic. I have always been a very highly competitive person, but I feel like the pandemic has busted me out of my routines and the way that I'm looking at so many aspects of my life. And I would say competition is one of them. I'm now approaching competition from a place of abundance. There is plenty of work to go around for all of us in public relations. And I think that we can probably be better served by supporting and learning from each other rather than focusing on competing. So I appreciate that. But I do think it's this idea of, I think of the pandemic as the great reset in many ways. I've been at Goff for 23 and a half years now, and you can get kind of stuck in a routine and stuck in a certain culture and stuck in the way that you're doing your work. And the pandemic changed all of that and made us look at things differently. I think about going into the pandemic for all of us in PR. I'm sure many of us were advising our clients on crisis communications. And often I would find balance with my crisis clients because I'd be advising them all day, but then I'd get to go home to my family at night and hopefully leave it behind until the news hit that evening. But when we went into the pandemic, everyone was in a state of crisis. We were in a state of crisis with our clients. We were worried about our businesses and how they were going to survive. And we were worried about our families and our kids and how they were going to get to school and how we were going to stay healthy. And there was no way to escape it. And I think that was kind of the low point where we started to realize we're going to have to figure out a new way of doing things. So this busting out of the routine, I think it changed the way that I thought about work-life balance and thought of it more as a work-life lens. My work was happening at home all of the time. My family was hearing about my job more than they'd ever had before, which was creating a lot of interesting conversations around the dinner table and in the middle of the day. And it was kind of nice to be able to share some of that. I don't know about you guys, but often I am so exhausted at the end of the day, especially dealing with a crisis situation, that I would go home and my family would ask how my day went. And I would think I don't even have the energy to explain it. Where now they were kind of following a little bit on this journey. And so we had lots of better conversations. And then for the team, we've always been a butts and seats company. We always thought everything works better as a team. We're all going to be at work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and that's how it's going to be. We would talk about flexibility, but we didn't really practice it. And all of a sudden we were forced to work remotely. And we found out that we could be just as strong of a team remotely. That said, we missed each other a lot. So we've come back to a hybrid approach now at Goff, where we work from home Mondays and Fridays, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're in the office. I have found that it's energizing for the team. We appreciate each other a lot more, and we really appreciate our downtime too at home. So it's really just changed the entire way that we look at things, and it's given us our company's 55 years old, kind of the shakeup that we needed to get into the modern era.
Great. Excuse me. Thanks, Jen. That was great. And I've got so much to unpack there with you, but I'm going to move on in the spirit of getting everybody in the game and getting the pregame jitters out of the way. Leonard, I'm going to move on to you. What would you say are the main issues and opportunities that we all face in today's conversation of wellness and work during the time of constant change?
Yeah, and I certainly agree and resonate with everything Jen said in terms of the Great Reset. So, and I'm going to provide even more potentially to unpack, but maybe this might stimulate further discussion. But so let me briefly touch on, rapid fire, a bunch of things that first come to mind. And I think Jen talked a lot that we can all relate to in terms of how it affects our personal lives, the work-life balance blur and so forth. But I also want to talk about things in terms of our lens as practitioners, because I'm spending a lot of time working with my clients on things like, okay, how do they set their strategies? How do they communicate those strategies externally? How do they communicate them with employees and things like that? And I think we need to take a step back because we've all been living this for the last 18 months and now almost 2 years. But the perspective, I think we need to keep that in mind, how unique these circumstances have been. For instance, I was on a team and we're writing remarks for the CEO for an internal discussion the other day, and we used the phrase, the worst global public health crisis in 100 years. That is truly, at the end of the day, what we're dealing with. That's how unique the circumstances are. And we rarely encounter any sort of a crisis, whether personal, business, or even external, if you talk about global affairs, that affects every aspect of our personal and professional and family lives. And the last thing that I think makes this unique is, there are now permanent changes. We don't know how long COVID is going to be with us and how we'll have to deal with it, but there are unmistakably permanent changes that affect all of these things. And let me just throw a few of them out there that we can talk about. Jen talked about work-life balance, but it's not just the work-life balance itself. It's how we measure it, and how we value it. Again, in terms of our clients and in terms of their employees. And I've been spending a lot of time, again, not just counseling my clients, but my clients have been doing a lot of surveys of their sort of network and their stakeholders and their employees and how these things have changed. How we work, obviously, is a given, and that is probably permanently changing. The importance of wellness is something that got varying degrees of focus and importance before, but now it is unmistakable in terms of the importance of wellness and how that is valued. And what's also changing and then is how we communicate these things, how we communicate them as individuals, again, in our work and family life, how we are counseling our clients to communicate that, and how both internally and externally, and how they need to think of it. What are the factors involved? It's not just, the facts of all these things, work-life balance, wellness, communications. It involves things like, what are the needs? What are the values? What are the strategies? How are these things going to be optimized? Or how are we going to deal with them from now on? So there are so many of these factors swirling around, and I know I was kind of babbling there, but that in a quick rapid fire Cliff Notes version, to me, are the issues and the opportunities that we're confronting now in terms of wellness and work.
Great. Thanks, Leonard. And you weren't babbling at all. That was great. I appreciate that. Anna, we're going to let you back clean up here for the opening statements. And when it comes to wellness and working, what are the greatest attitudinal and behavioral shifts you've seen pre-pandemic, mid-pandemic, and hopefully looking to post-pandemic?
Thanks, Dave. And it's perfect to follow Leonard, because I think he captured some of those shifts that really you can't emphasize enough, because I think the biggest shift is just the number of conversations and the willingness to talk about wellness. Before, I've had mental health professionals say, people who've been in the field for 30 years say, I've never had more people come, just, people in different parts of my life talk about how they're doing. And we've never been more willing to talk about this. We see ourselves in this conversation. And I think businesses are more interested in talking about wellness, whereas before there was more reticence about it. It was like talking about other people. But now I think we recognize that it's important conversation for us as individuals, for everyone, all of our staff. It's important for productivity, right? So it's critical to everything we do. It's not just like another thing we have to add on, then we have to kind of do the right thing kind of stuff. So I think that's probably the biggest change. And then I think it's a great opportunity because at least, the conversations that my colleagues who do more workplace wellness work have had, it sounds like there's a lot more deeper conversation about how we can go deeper beyond some of the basic practices of wellness and self-care, which are critical, don't get me wrong. And I could talk all day about all kinds of self-care practices, but we need to get deeper into policy and systems changes. That's kind of our public health speak. But I think businesses are starting to ask those questions, or continuing to ask those questions. I heard a colleague recently talk about research around retail organizations that are shifting how they do staffing and scheduling to help reduce stress. So back to what Leonard said, we're measuring this in different ways, right? We're actually starting to measure it and think about it in terms of all of our decisions. So those are the biggest shifts, the recognition that it's important to everybody, going deeper into kind of policies and practices. And then I guess the third thing, because it's always nice to have three, right, is just our emphasis on social connectedness. That was always an issue pre-pandemic. We actually were in a social isolation and loneliness epidemic. If you didn't know that, our former Surgeon General had declared it an epidemic, and it only was exacerbated during COVID. And I think we recognize that in a much deeper way now, and recognize how important those connections are to our well-being. And we have a long way to go to figure out how to, connect each other because the conversation continues. Many of us are still working from home. And so, we have so much to do to increase social connection and really be more intentional about connecting throughout work and in different ways, and helping to build those relationships, which are critical in every field. So those, I think, are probably the three biggest trends that I would name.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Anna. A couple of you mentioned measurement, and Leonard, I'll start with you and then I'll go over to you, Anna, in terms of, and I won't leave you out of the mix, Jen. We'll let you talk about measurement too, because I know it's important in the agency life. But Leonard, can you talk a little bit about what are some measurement factors that are worth looking at, and how you best assess looking at measurement as a tool for this whole issue?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of employee surveys. I think it's important to get that feedback, in terms of what our employees' needs, what are, how are their values changing? There's a danger in employee surveys too, because you tend to sort of, look at the top line numbers and sort of apply it to the entire group, and then not necessarily, realizing that no matter how big or small your organization is or your client's organization is, it's made up of individuals. One of my clients has 6,000 people. So we don't just look at the survey and say, hey, 51% say this or want this. We have to keep in mind, at the end of the day, it's 6,000 different individuals, 6,000 jobs, 6,000 families that are involved. And so that also, we talk about measurement. Measurement's important. You have to use the data to drive decisions, but there also has to be a qualitative aspect of the measurement too. You have to sort of read behind the numbers. You have to sort of understand what's motivating people, what their real feelings are. So as important as measurement is, yes, it's important to collect data so that you can get numbers. It's important to get the qualitative data behind that. And there was a third aspect I was going to mention too. My coffee hasn't quite kicked in this morning, and maybe that'll come to me in a sec. So I'll pass the mic for the moment.
Great. Anna, do you have thoughts on measurement?
I don't know what people are measuring, but I guess my only thoughts would be if your survey includes things like how people feel connected, just thinking about what are the most important well-being components, right? So it's connection, sense of identity, and purpose, right? If people feel like their work is purposeful. And then I guess I'm with you, Leonard. My coffee is still kicking.
Also, I don't know, maybe we can ping pong it a little bit here. But the other thing I was going to mention is, that beyond measurement too, it's important for people to have a feedback mechanism, to push their needs, whatever, to their boss up the chain, or to some sort of a, whether it's HR or something. People have to have a means to provide feedback, on an individual basis.
Great. Jen, anything you'd like to add to the measurement discussion?
Well, I guess just from a really practical standpoint, I think that it's the mix between going through the pandemic and having this entire shift in the way that we're thinking what people expect from their workplace and their employers, and then add it to this massive shift in people looking for new jobs. And I think employers more than ever are saying, our people are so valuable. We don't want to lose them because it's going to be almost impossible to get them back. So I feel like employers are more open than ever to what their employees have to say. And I think about it just from a very practical term, from what Goff did after we had been home working from home for over a year, and we started to think about coming back. So I put small groups together of everyone in the office, and we had conversations virtually about what have we enjoyed about working at home during the pandemic? What has worked well? What hasn't? What have we lost? What have we gained? And what might this look like when we emerge from it? And that's really how we got to this hybrid model. But that was based on the feedback of everyone coming together and truly saying, you know what, we really liked this being able to be flexible, but honestly, we really missed each other. And so it didn't feel like a forced thing when we came back. We came back pretty early. We were all back as of July 1. And now we've been doing this for quite some time. And it has just, I think had we just had that come from the top and tell everyone the way it was going to be, it maybe wouldn't be as appreciated as it is now, because it truly was a group process thinking through it.
I think one of the things I've learned in this process is you can't predict who's where on the conservative to liberal continuum of who's comfortable being around people, who's not. People you might have thought before pandemic would have been totally comfortable are completely uncomfortable, and vice versa. So is there anything you, from a employee survey piece or the interactions, Jen, you talked about meeting with small groups, is there anything you learned in that process that surprised you?
Absolutely, David. And same thing as what you just said, that I have blind spots, right? And I can't predict how people are going to feel. Who has been ultra worried, right, about the pandemic and catching COVID are people that I never would have predicted 3 years ago. Who has been more distracted at home? Who has really missed being in the office because they need people? Like, I just didn't quite realize the depth of every single person and how different we all were. And I think I'm a lot more attuned to that than I was before, because I used to think, well, if I feel like this, I guess probably most other people feel like this too, but that is not the case at all. So that's why we have to ask those questions. And it doesn't mean just because you ask questions, not everyone's going to feel the same way. You can't make it work for every single person, but it is good to understand the varied opinions as you're planning.
Great, thank you. And has there been anything that surprised you in this whole endeavor?
The whole situation surprised. I don't know. I mean, I think those are great things, Jennifer, that you shared. I think, no, what was the most surprising? Just how long this has lasted. That's what I think is the most surprising, is how long this has lasted, because every little segment, at least in public health, you know, people would, you'd get little inklings, people would start to talk, well, you know, more than 6 months, and it'd be like, what, really? And then at 6 months point, people were talking about a year, and then, you know, and it just keeps going. And so I think even public health was shocked about how long this is lasting. And yeah, that's the biggest shock for me.
So as a follow-up to that, Anna, what are your thoughts in terms of managing expectations? As you said, nobody thought we'd be out this long. What do you think are things we can do to manage expectations, both in your own personal expectations and those of people around you?
That's a great question. I think that in terms of COVID, is that what you mean? Manage expectations in terms of COVID? I am not in a great position to predict what the future holds for COVID. I'm not directly working on that, but we just have to expect the unexpected, right? So we really don't know how it's going to evolve, or how, you know, I think that all of us have been getting comfortable in living in the unknown, which is one of the most challenging parts, right? And that's, I think, what impacts our well-being too, because we like to have some control over our life. Right. And so we always talk about thinking about wellness, right? Find things that you can control. I mean, it's a common concept, right? Find things you can control and let go of the rest. So I don't know what to tell you about future expectations. I mean, we're starting to level off in some ways and getting comfortable with the new normal, but we just, I mean, just having lived what we've just lived through, it's too risky to say what we should expect. Right?
I think there's benefit in having embraced uncertainty. And we went through something where we had no idea how we were going to come out on the other side. And guess what? We're not on the other side, but we're all still here. We're having good, deep, honest conversations, relationships. We've been more creative, more resilient, and maybe just feeling more comfortable being in this place. I feel like in many ways it's good, right? And if you think about it as a positive thing, before we were just going through the motions, afraid of, I mean, and I say we, again, not everybody feels the way that I feel, but feeling a lot more afraid of change and taking risk. And in our industry that is rapidly changing, we have to take risks in order to survive and stay at the top of our game. And I feel like because we have all gotten more comfortable with it, it's making us better because we're taking more risks because we know we can do it and we can survive through that.
Great. Leonard, anything you want to add relative to expectations?
Yes, because I think it's so important what Jen and Anna were mentioning in terms of becoming more comfortable with uncertainty, because health and wellness first and foremost. We've all looked at it. I think in terms of health, maintaining our own health, our family's health, the health of those around us. But at the same time, certainly, we have to bear in mind things like stress, anxiety, which I think, we've all experienced, and everybody, I think, everybody around us is experiencing too. So it's not just a matter of, maintaining our physical health, well-being is so much in terms of, mental, psychological, emotional health. And that I think is so important to maintain and to focus on as well.
So we'll shift gears a little bit here. Jennifer, when excuse me, when we spoke last week, you mentioned it earlier in the conversation introduction here, you talked about us all living the same crisis, which is different than historical. Usually you deal with the crisis and you get to go home. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about what that means and how we should deal with the issue that we're all in this shared crisis together and it's always ever present?
I think it's been a bit level setting to all be in the same crisis, and maybe it has allowed us to relate even more to our clients because we're feeling the same thing. One of the things that I love about crisis communications, I'm somebody who I get exhausted by small talk. I feel like it is such a waste of time. If I'm going to spend time with you, I want to strip away all of that crap and just get to who you are and have real conversations. To me, that fills my bucket, right? It's the small talk that is exhausting. When you are in a crisis with a client, you can be with CEOs who normally can put on such a strong face, and they are in a moment of feeling vulnerable. And so immediately you get to this really good, deep, honest place with them. And I love that feeling. And so because so many of my clients have been in crisis and my team has been in crisis, I'm trying just to make that, it doesn't have to be a crisis situation to feel like that. Let's just start getting into it. None of us have the time for all of this small talk. Let's just start to really get to know each other and what we're about. And to me, that is what feels good. So, I think it's all, again, in the way that you look at it. You can think of it as being exhausting, or you can think of it as an incredible opportunity to really get to know people. I think about this summer, I was at my cabin. I literally had not showered for 3 days. I had been on the lake. I get a call from a college president in the midst of a crisis. I come in, I'm in a baseball cap, no makeup, bad internet connection, but we're just all there and present. And we don't have time to worry about the fact that I don't have a suit coat on and I haven't been prepared for this meeting. We're just there with each other and dealing with these things as they happen. And so I'm just trying to take that kind of a feeling back into our kind of everyday life.
Great.
Totally
you.
resonates. I'm just jumping in because that really resonates. I agree. I think that's another trend is it's really taken our humanity, like it's just made us all more human and real with each other. I totally agree. That was beautiful.
So how do we, what are some ways that we can look at the future and take the good of what has happened with this? I mean, here's a great example. 2 years ago, I couldn't have done this technology piece even. I wouldn't know how to. So how do we take the good we've learned out of the pandemic and carry it forward as we get past the pandemic? Annie, you want to start with that one?
Well, I guess since, my interest and expertise is around well-being, I guess I would say taking the good about centering wellness and well-being in our everyday practices and building it into our organizations and all of the decisions we make in the organizations that you work in. I think that would be a brilliant, amazing thing to bring into the future.
Great. Great, thank you. And Leonard, how about you from your perspective? What are things we can take into the future with this?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the technology aspect, that this is, accelerated a trend, probably by about 10 years. But I think, we've understood now as individuals, yes, we can work remotely. The leaders have learned that, yes, our teams can still be productive, and like I said, that's sort of all permanently altered. I think, the workforce and the landscape, but I think Jen touched on it earlier. It's like, okay, how do we find that balance? So that we're productive, we're more flexible, we can get the work-life balance, but, we can still collaborate. We can still have that human and social contact with each other. I think a lot of organizations are struggling. How do we find that balance? Do we go 100% remote? Do we go 100% back in office? Do we get a hybrid system? And whichever route we choose, how do we optimize balancing all those factors? And you know what? I think it's going to be exciting. I don't think it's like we were saying, the other aspect, of course, is, I think hopefully we come out of this, we're all more comfortable with uncertainty and realizing, yes, we could work through whatever we need to. But I think to me, it's going to be exciting. The future of work, how we work, where we work, and I am looking forward to that.
So I will say, Leonard, thank you for that comment. One of the things I note is it's both in this conversation and the previous conversations, you all seem to be optimists and very upbeat about, even amidst a pandemic, about the future and what it can hold. How do you maintain that optimism? Jen, I'll start with you.
Because it's exhausting to be a pessimist, right? But I mean, that's part of success, right? Taking what you have, making the most of it, reinventing, and that's part of leadership too. I mean, even the days that, I think it's being honest about the fact that we don't always feel like this, right? We're not, I can't position myself as always being like this, always being on. I have plenty of days when I come home at the end of the night, I don't feel like talking to anyone. I just want to crawl in bed and binge watch TV. And I've been better about letting myself do that. That doesn't mean I'm not productive. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be successful. It just means my mind needs a break. And so I've been more open to doing that. I've been more open to talking to my team about the fact that I do that. So I guess it's more of thinking about life as a marathon instead of a sprint. Taking these times and really letting yourself pause or do something meaningless is going to make you better in the long run. I will say that's one culture thing that we've had at Goff forever, which is when we take PTO, we truly want you to take PTO. None of this, like, people get points for checking their emails and kind of being plugged in. Like, you need a true break. And so everything that we do at Goff is as a team. And we don't take vacations the same time as our team because we're there to support each other. And I know I get busy then when my teammates are on vacation, but I am glad to help them because I know when I go on vacation, they're going to make sure that I don't have to worry about anything. So it truly is supporting each other to give each other the time that we need when we need it.
It's a great comment. Leonard, how about you? How do you keep your spirits high and be energized like you demonstrate? Because I know it's not just when you're on a webinar. I've experienced you outside of a webinar, and you're very upbeat. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, coffee and binge watching. Isn't that the answer? Like Jen was suggesting. But no, at the end of the day, I think I'm optimistic because I think, we're natural problem solvers, particularly I think in the PR industry. That at the end of the day, that's our job every day. Is solving problems for our clients. And I'm gonna, in a philosophical sense, I like to think that we as humans, that we are born problem solvers. You look at every aspect of our life, as parents, as family members, as employees, especially as a parent, everything there is problem solving at the end of the day. But I do think sort of, again, sociologically, evolutionarily, physical, however you want to put it, I think we are wired to be problem solvers. Has this been a problem? Oh yeah, this last year and a half has been, maybe the biggest problem that any of us have faced in some aspects. But I think, I think, we as people, but especially, we'll give ourselves a pat on the back as PR practitioners. I think we are born problem solvers. We look at things, how can we tackle it? How can we manage it? How can we improve it? And I think that serves us well.
Can I just chime in? Because Leonard, that's really resonates with me. And that is what we're doing every single day. I think the other thing that we learn in our industry is that we live in a world of gray. We see behind the curtains, and we know that no matter how great an organization looks, how great a company works, every single one has problems, and they are messy problems. And none of them are black and white. And I think it gives us maybe more compassion and patience and understanding to know that life is just messy. And so when we go back to our personal lives and things aren't perfect with our kids, of course they're not. They're human beings. Life is just messy. And I think that it does give us that perspective as PR practitioners that if we can kind of carry what we've learned through doing our craft into our personal life, it does serve us well.
Anna, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, that's really, you're all making me want to think about PR as a field. This is really exciting because I think what keeps me hopeful and engaged is there's good work to do, and the issues and the challenges are really exciting and important. And so that's what gets me going. But I think there's also a danger maybe to really celebrate just natural optimism, because I think there's also some work that we can all do to promote our positivity. Back to wellness, there's really good research that we can work on that and improve that. There's practices. Sometimes people think it's silly, but gratitude is actually a muscle that we can promote and build and practice, and it has amazing impacts on our health and our well-being. I recently read more about evidence that gratitude can reduce our blood pressure. It can help improve our relationships. It can help to reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. So I think, practicing gratitude, I don't know about you, but I have more work to do than I can actually accomplish in a day. And so I usually end the day thinking like, oh, I've got this, all these things that I haven't yet accomplished. But there's a practice, simple, like write down and think about what you did do today, think about what you have accomplished. Sometimes we just need to shift, and we're all probably very familiar with the downward spiral thinking, because all of us, again, are human, and we focus on the negative things a lot of times. So I I don't think it's an either or. Like, I think that we can build that muscle, and we have to really think more intentionally about how to do that. So that's what I would add to the optimism conversation.
I love the that idea of building your attitude muscles. I think that's a great comment. I'm going to shift gears because I think I just saw a cat enter one of your screens. Is that right, Leonard? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, he's my sort of my wingman and keeps me company during my Zoom calls. So
I bring it up because that is something very different than something pre-pandemic, which I have grand dogs. So once in a while, my kids bring over their dogs for us to watch during the day when I'm working from home. And I would have never had a dog at the office before. I know some people do, and some people have pets, but it hasn't been very prevalent. Do you think that will change in the future when we are all back together?
But again, like I was saying, I think what we're seeing is, we're seeing a lot of trends accelerate probably by a good 10 years. You look at like, Google and their famous, bring your pets to work every day. Right. Policy, and I think that's just one aspect of it too, and then going back to what Jen was saying, whether we're working, going to go back to working in the office or hybrid or 100% remote, that's a factor, and I think it might have been Anna talking about, the loneliness and the social isolation things, these are important issues, and then for me, pets and my loyal companion here and your grand dogs are definitely part of that.
Right. I think, interestingly, Jen, were you going to say something?
I just think about, like, remember the early days of the pandemic? I know when we first started doing video calls, and me thinking, like, do we need to set expectations about what people are wearing? Do we need to tell them to have their pets in the other room, right? Because we were still in that mode of we have to look perfect and professional on phone calls with our clients. And I can't believe we're all at home. What does this world come to? And then now it has just become so accepted and in a really good way, right? And I think that's part of that deeper understanding. Like, we all have pets. We all love our pets, right? That's not like a sign of weakness. Now we start talking about our pets, and we start talking about our kids, and we start talking about what we're seeing of people in their backgrounds. And I think that's just been another way that we've created these deeper connections during the pandemic, even though we've been virtual. We've even gotten used to the fact that we're not making direct eye contact on the screen. That would drive me nuts in the beginning of this. But we've all just adjusted.
And that's such an important point, Jen. I think one of the great things that's come out of this has sort of been this enhanced, shared sense of humanity. Again, particularly for my coworkers, and I think about my bosses. I've now met all their kids, even if they don't work in the same city here. I know all about their family lives. I've taken so many calls from bosses and clients, who are dropping their kids off at school, or taking their kids to the doctor, and it just, it takes us out of our silos. I think, and really sort of, I think gives an appreciation again for our shared humanity. And to me, that's been, a really positive and uplifting result of all this.
Great. So I will tell you, I think I've been miscast a little bit in my role in general. I'm a painful introvert, as it turns out, and I have to not act like an introvert in my job. That's my job, is to come out of that shell, and that doesn't mean I don't need to find time to recover after a long day's work. But I bring it up because I am craving the human interaction, and I'd hate to think what an extrovert is going through in this whole process, because if I'm craving it as a severe introvert, everybody's got to be craving it to some degree. So how do you think we'll accommodate that long term? How the human element can only be brought so far along when we're talking on a screen like this. I would much rather be face to face with each of you in this process. So what will the future bring, do you think, assuming we get by the pandemic, in terms of making a hybrid work, but having some time together? Put on your or look into your crystal ball and tell me what you see for the future assuming we get by the pandemic, whenever that day is.
I just love hanging out with other PR people, you know, because I think in our industries, everyone assumes we're all extroverts, right? That because we have to be on all of the time, and everyone thinks, oh, this must just be so easy for them, that they're just born to do this. But you know, I've had so many conversations with people since the pandemic about the fact that most of us truly are introverts, right? Or we're we're extroverted during the day, but like that me going and binge watching TV, I think that means that truly I maybe am more of an introvert than I thought, because I need those moments. We've just been better about acknowledging that we're not all just perfect out there. And, you know, I think, so what are we going to carry with us? Prior to the pandemic, in the office 5 days a week, events most evenings, go, 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 go. So since this, you know, I think it is more of a blend when you can be having video conferences with clients who are in other states. That's great. That's a better connection than the phone. But those moments that we're with other human beings, I've noticed meetings that I have in person now, I keep running over because my gosh, it's such a treat to be with them in person that I would hate to look at my watch, right? Where when we're 1 minute late to a Zoom call, we are completely late. So I think it's going to be a bit of that blend. I find myself saying no to a lot more, but then needing to force myself to say yes to some things too, to kind of reintegrate into the world. I think it's all of us just being a little bit choosier and more careful with our time.
And I saw you nodding your head during some of that. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm agreeing with so much of what people are sharing. It's interesting. I'm not in this field, but I can speak to what we have done. You know, I think we've all recognized in public health, we can actually be much more productive at home in many ways. And so we're anticipating a hybrid model after at some point, but that point keeps getting pushed away. But I think I really appreciate what Jen was saying about being choosier, because the downside of being home and being able to have back to back meetings is it can be exhausting, right? Whereas before you'd have to travel, you have a little time to kind of, you know, collect your thoughts and think about, okay, what do I have going next? But we can just, you know, you could have 8 straight meetings, which is a lot. And so I think we do have to be choosier. So I appreciate that comment.
And my thought is that, you know, to me, it's been helpful both personally and professionally that it takes a little effort, you know, to try to find time and occasion to connect with people. I've spent a lot more time on the phone. Hey, what's a phone call? I'd almost forgotten what that's like. But that there's a certain different kind of intimacy, you know, and sort of one-on-one connection talking with on the phone with someone that I'd sort of gotten away with, whether it's a family member or a friend. But even sort of in the work professional environment, you know, we had a team holiday dinner last year, which was so much fun. You know, my boss handed out, you know, DoorDash cards. And, you know, we all set a time and, you know, we sort of had this virtual meal together with no agenda other than that. And that was great. And I know for some of my clients, they've had sort of like, you know, sort of virtual offsites where everybody sort of gets the same package and whatever. It could be like, you know, a puzzle or a game or something or some sort of a task, you know, virtual, you know, mystery room kind of a thing. But it does take a little effort to try to, you know, like I said, find the occasions to make those connections. And again, you know, just if it's in a more professional setting, I think it's important not for those things to be forced necessarily. You know, you can't necessarily force togetherness, you know, and social mingling. But again, you know, to me, I find if I put and again, I will also join the severe introvert club here. But I find like it's worthwhile to put a little effort in on my part, even if I sometimes am reluctant to do it, you know, to try and, you know, make sure I prioritize, you know, keeping some of those connections going.
Great, thank you. Leonard, the other thing when we talked last week, you talked about the holistic approach and you mentioned that a little bit here. Can you spend a little time, talking about the holistic perspective, what are the different varieties of things we should consider and take into account as we look at that issue?
Yeah, that, I could go on for days about that, but like I was saying earlier, it's it's not just about physical health. It's about our emotional health, but again, the last 2 years have impacted every aspect of our lives, our work, our family, our parenting, how we take care of our own parents. It's affected our ability to socialize, then just look, we're coming into the holidays, and I think we all have to deal with these things like, okay, are we going to be able to get together with our family and friends? If we do it, how do we do it? What are the logistics going to look like, and things like that. And personally, for me and a lot of other people, we find that stressful. And to me, I think what's been the most difficult thing about the last year and a half is, to me, there's sort of been like this underlying elevated stress that's always there, kind of like this sort of like a low grade hum or white noise, that I can never quite shake or get away from, so, we can't think of all these factors in isolation. How is our work going? How is our family life going? How is our social life going? We have to realize they're all interconnected right now, because of the pandemic. So it's I think Anna used the phrase self-care very early on, which is so important. We're so focused on getting things done, personally, professional, family. And I think we have to take that step back and sort of ask ourselves, how am I doing? I think that's so important. And then, and again, that covers every aspect, physical, emotional, are we getting enough rest? Are we getting activities in? Are we moving our bodies? So there's so much to focus on. There's so much to do these days, but let's take a step back, and think, are we doing the right things for ourselves too?
Can I
Great.
just jump in? Can I say, add something? Because I think that's brilliant. And the other part of that is, it was always connected. Right now we just recognize it. Right? Those things were always connected. How our bodies are doing, how our minds are doing, impacts how our work is going. Our work impacts how our health is. So how our communities are organized. And so all of those things, I think we just see it more clearly now. Right? Whether school is actually happening impacts my life in a very real way. Right? Like, I need those systems to be in place and working effectively so that I can do what I need to do. Just like we need our bodies to work and our minds. And so, yeah, I think the brilliant part is that we all see that more now, clearly.
So we're kind of forced into that in today's environment. How do we make sure that stays alive when post-pandemic, assuming we get to post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think
Jen, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I don't
Go
think
ahead,
I don't think we're quite going back. I think like Anna just said and said previously, it's like, what, we're all more aware of all the aspects of wellness. So I hopefully that's something we will continue to carry with us going forward.
Great.
Jen, I agree. I think, we all know how short attention spans are, especially those of us in the crisis communications business. And thank God attention spans are short, right? For our clients' sake. But I agree with Leonard. We're not going back. Think about in the beginning of the pandemic when we kept saying, when we get back to normal, when we get back to normal. And then it was when we get to the new normal. And now I think we're like, well, when do we even say that? I know I catch myself saying, back when we were in the pandemic, we're still in the pandemic. Some people I think are experiencing it more than others. There's still people that are working at home full time. I feel like we've been done with the pandemic for a while. But I don't think we're going back. I think that this was kind of, Leonard made the point too, this accelerated trends 10 years. We've seen this across lots of industries and many different businesses. We've seen this in our own business. And I hope that it just pushes us, now we're in that 10 years forward. And what does that look like heading into the future? And I know earlier on, I talked about the shortage of employees. I think that's helping us stay there too. If if it was right now so easy to recruit people, would we still be having all of these conversations? You know, like this, the shortage of employees is making us think about long-term systemic changes that are really going to keep our talent.
Great. Let me ask you each this question, and left to right on my screen is Leonard, Jen, and then Anna. So I'll go take it in that order. What do you see as the biggest stressors, either for yourself or for your coworkers or your friends, as in today's world? I mean, it might have been different even a year ago, but where you sit today, what are the biggest stressors that you see?
Yeah, to me, it's an issue of, like I said, sort of, before I make any decision about any aspect of my life, whether it's, professional, personal, family, social, I have to think and make that decision in terms of the pandemic, in terms of, does it affect my logistics? Does it affect, am I willing to do this? Is there an elevated risk if I see somebody or if I travel or things like that? So, just having to take that step, seemingly every time I make a decision, is stressful, is kind of wearing, but, to me is important too. So to me, that's always top of mind.
Jen, how about you?
To me, the one thing that's causing me more stress is our political division. And I run a public affairs company, right? I know exactly how politics work, but it has become so personal. And it's become personal with our families. And it's been, and I think that's the aspect of it that's been hard. We're having a conversation about all getting together for Thanksgiving. And, my parents have this big party out in their barn and we're outside all day, but then we go in to eat. And my mom said in the family-wide email, if you're coming inside and you're not vaccinated, we want you to wear a mask. Well, that set off some conversations, right, with the family. And I think, why can't we all just be happy that we're going to be together and make accommodations for each other, whatever that's going to be? But instead, it needs to be a political debate then among the family. And so I think that's maybe what's hard, is just this division everywhere. So we deal with it personally in our own lives, with our friends, with our families. And then when we're helping clients navigate through that, that's hard too. So it's not the pandemic, but it is a pandemic of people feeling so polarized that's been really hard to get through.
Anna?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think in my world, the thing that is the most stressful is the enormity of the need. And, people are talking about the wave of the mental health crisis that that's emerging, that has been there before and is now really emerging. And there's so much to there's more work, there's more to do that we're not prepared to do. It's like we have to catch up, right? We have to build the political will. People know that this problem is here and that it's coming, but we don't really have enough will to do all that is needed to do, right? So that's really the most stressful piece in my world. I don't know how that translates to your world, but I guess the translation is that a lot of us have experienced trauma in the last 2 years, and some of it is very personal trauma, but it's just the pile, we call it the pile up of toxic stress. And that our bodies aren't equipped to handle toxic stress for 2 years, right? That doesn't, that we're not built that way. Like 20 minutes at a time is the max, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. And then, you resolve the problem and you move on, but 2 years is too much. And so I think that it's going to take us some time to get back to center, all of us. And so and some of us are really going to experience a lot more need than, I don't know. It's just, this isn't going to go away right away. Yeah, it's going to take some time.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one last question, then we're going to open it up to our audience to ask questions through the chat. So I'll remind you, if you chat the questions, we will get them asked as best we can. The final question I wanted to ask you all had to do with the other end of that continuum, which is not just what are the stressors, but what do you do? You know, self-help came up several times here. What do you do for your own self-help, or what do you see out there as good ideas that you thought, oh, that's a great strategy for pursuing self-help? And Anna, why don't we start your end and we'll go the other way this time?
Sure. I guess the most simple ones are meditation and breathing. And my favorite thing is just promoting access to nature. I think it's something we undervalue, and we, I think, learned to appreciate it a little bit during the pandemic because it was the one thing that we could have access to. It's a natural stress buffer, and it's a critical, you know, getting outside can do wonders for your well-being. So that's something that maybe you haven't thought about, and one of my favorite things to do.
Great, thank you. Jen?
If you read the Business Journal article, one of the things my family did is we bought a wood-fired sauna during the pandemic, and I love that thing. So whenever we're home at night, one person's making dinner and then the other is firing up the sauna, as we call it. True Finns call it a sauna. The act of making and tending to the fire, and then we get that thing up to 180, and it's my husband and me, and then our freshman in high school son. We sit out there and we sweat. And the beauty is you can't bring your devices in because it's too dang hot in there. It's not good for them. So we sit there in the dark and we sweat and we talk. And I have been sleeping better at night than I ever have before. It is just, I think it's the ritual, it's the cleansing of it, and it is just that amazing like family time, kind of mixing all of it together. That's been really fun for us.
Great. And Leonard?
There's the mute button. Yeah, you know, whether it's, you know, building a sauna, going out in nature, you know, I think those are fantastic. You know, it's just, you know, prioritize well-being and self-care. You know, it's so easy to get wrapped up, like there's so much to do every minute of the day these days. There's so many things we could potentially worry about, but it's like carve out time for yourself, you know, whether it's just a half hour or an hour a day, you know, to take a walk, you know, call a friend. You know, in my case, you know, I close the door and I do my yoga and meditation, and it is non-negotiable. No calls, no emails. That is my time. You know, carve out time, make it a priority, and that will give you sort of, I think, you know, a little better resilience to then go ahead and tackle everything else.
Great. Well, thank you all. This has been phenomenal, and the time went by too fast, but I appreciate all of your insights. We're now going to open it up to questions from our viewers. And we've got one in the chat right now, but I encourage others to put their questions in. And and Jen is now recruiting people to come over to her sauna. So, but at any rate, we've got a question from Amy Franti, and the question is, are there any thoughts on the Great Resignation? How is it impacting wellness? Are people resigning in mass numbers because of their concern for their wellness, physical, mental, social, etc.? Any thoughts on the mass resignation or the Great Resignation?
I know Jen had touched on.
Go ahead, Leonard.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I just forgot to mute, so I won't even have to bother unmuting. I think Jen had touched on it earlier that, you know, so, you know, I don't want to put it in such crude terms, but it is somewhat a seller's market. You know, the people have a little more leverage to say, like, this is what I want my work life to be. This is what I want my work life balance to be. You know, these are the things that I would like to have. Doesn't mean you're always going to get it, you know, but I think there's a little more ability to look for those things, ask for those things, push for those things sometimes, because we are able to, and because the labor market is what it is, the employers, sometimes I think have to be more accommodating for those things. And that's also, I think, a positive outgrowth.
Anna, anything to add there?
I'm trying to understand the Great Resignation more, but I guess if it leads to people doing things that they truly believe in and want to do, that's going to have a tremendous shift on our well-being at a population level, because having that sense of purpose is so critical for our well-being. It's, part of the definition. And, we spend a lot of time at work. So if it leads, I'm just trying to really appreciate and understand it. That's my only thought, really. It has potential.
Jen, go
I
ahead.
think about the many generations working in our workforce right now. And I think I'm appreciating more where our younger generations are. I'm of the generation where you put your head down, you work hard, you put your hours in, you do not complain, and you will be rewarded for it. Hopefully, if your boss is paying attention, right? And you just kind of hope for the best and you worked hard. And this generation, this younger generation coming up is not at all like that. They are looking for purpose. And I do a lot of work in higher ed, and we're seeing it become even larger, right? So the 30-year-olds, when they were graduating from college, they asked questions about, would you rather take a job and make more money or make less and feel purpose? And, it was, more like a 50-50 with the 30-year-olds. Now this new generation coming out, almost all of them would rather have a job with purpose than a job where they're just making a lot of money. And so I really think as a leader have to be in tune to that. How do I find that purpose? It's different than me. I can't look at them and say, just put your head down and do your job. We have to create opportunities for purpose. So I know at Goff, we're doing a lot more pro bono work than we did in the past. Employees love that. They love to feel like they're part of it. And honestly, it's something that Goff can do. After George Floyd, my employees asked, what is Goff doing about this? Is Goff going to issue a statement? And I thought, this is crazy. Nobody cares what Goff Public has to say about this. And so it was really a moment to think about, but what are we doing? How are we going to be part of this solution? So we've talked about the fact that the best asset that Goff has are our people. And we are really good at amplifying messages for organizations doing great work. So we decided to put out a call for organizations that are already doing good work around racial justice, and let's support what they're doing. And it was incredibly meaningful, and we all got so much out of it, and that we've decided to do it again. So this is now an annual call. We're working with different organizations each year. We're getting exposed to networks that we've never been involved with in the past. So I think it's just a recognition that the generations are different, and there are so many of us working together. And so you have to create spaces that are going to accommodate everybody's different needs in order to be able to keep them.
Great.
Yeah, I love what Jen was saying about purpose, which is so important, particularly to the younger generations, and maybe should be to everybody, but it is becoming a priority. One other aspect of it too is, one of our clients, we just did a survey of 2,000 attorneys, and granted, it's only attorneys, but I think, a lot of these characteristics we're probably finding emerging across other industries as well. But so, the attorneys basically said, not only say post-pandemic, but very recently, it's like, look, we're willing to work the same number of hours. We're not necessarily looking for a reduction of hours. And these are people who invented the 80-hour work week. But they said that, but in exchange, we want much more say and flexibility in how we work, where we work, and when we work. We want greater autonomy. We want more authority for those things. We want more flexibility. And implicit in that too is, we want more trust. That you will trust me to get the work done, but you will leave it to me in terms of how and where I do it. And I think that those types of things, I think we're seeing a lot more of Again, not just in attorneys, but I think in a lot of the workforce these days.
Great. Amy, thanks for that question. It was inspired a lot of good conversation. We've got one from Linda Wickstrom, who is asking, what books have you found helpful in learning to shift your focus, to sustain your focus toward well-being? Let's start with Anna on that one.
The first thing that came to mind was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I would recommend that one. I'm looking at my bookshelf here. What do I have? My Grandmother's Hands is a great one about racial trauma and how we can address that. And it's Resmaa Menakem. And he talks a lot about how trauma is in our bodies and how we can, start to unpack that, by recognizing and coming into and kind of feeling what's happening in our bodies. I always like to do 3 things. Flourish is another good book that is by Dr. Martin Seligman. He's the founder of positive psychology. And that, I don't know how that would resonate with everyone, but it has some good practices. Yeah, okay, Leonard's giving a thumbs up. All right, those are my 3 recommendations. I'll think of some more and put it in the chat.
Great, terrific. Leonard, how about you?
Yeah, I just want to extend on what Anna was saying about Martin Seligman, who was one of my heroes. And I highly recommend him, and I think one of his proteges named Carol Zweck. Zweck, because we were talking about optimism and I've mentioned about like gratitude, but they've started a whole sort of new segment of psychology called positive psychology, that optimism is not a trait you are born with. Like Anna said, it is actually a muscle that you can grow and you can develop and sustain over time. And if you can get to that, and change your outlook, it will improve every other aspect of your life. So yeah, I just want to use the time to second what Anna was saying about Dr. Martin Seligman. Google him, get his books on Amazon. It is a complete game changer.
Great. And Jen?
One book that I've been reading from a running a business perspective is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. It is all about kind of what I was talking about, like the long game, right? And not these little, it isn't a win-lose scenario, but it is truly about companies that can stay in business are ultimately the ones that win. And so it just changes the way that you're thinking. And for me, for any of you that, have done your colors assessment, right? Too much of my yellow comes out where it's like, make a list, accomplish, accomplish, accomplish. And I lose sight of the fact that there is a much longer game here. And so it has helped me to put things in perspective.
Great. Okay, we've got one from Amanda Peshta, who I happen to know is an excellent professional because she works with me. Jen talked about a bit about how the pandemic has forced us to talk about our differences in politics and beliefs with family, friends, etc. Do you think that has been a good thing in any way, that we have been forced to talk about real issues? Personally, though it's difficult and sometimes stress-inducing to have those conversations, I'm learning more about who the people around me really are and being more thoughtful about who I want to surround myself with, which relates to overall well-being. Jen, do you want to speak to that?
I completely agree about the, being aware of who you want around you. Though, I had this conversation with a good friend of mine from back in the college days, and we were on, opposite ends of the political spectrum. And we had the best conversations in college. Now, this was in the late 90s, right? I mean, it's a different time. But I used to love talking politics with friends because ultimately, I always felt like everybody's hearts are kind of in the same place of where we wanted to get to, but we just had different approaches to get there. So I would love to have dinner conversations and debate our different approaches. And at the end of the day, all know that we were kind of consistent in our hearts. The division has made that more difficult. And I think we see it especially, there's one thing professionally that we can handle. There's another thing that gets pretty personal within families that I've seen that I don't know. I don't know if that's been a good thing, or if sometimes it would better just to be a little bit more in ignorant bliss.
Jen, it sounds like you went to a great college. Where'd you go?
Thanks, Dave. I went to St. Olaf College in beautiful Northfield, where you are headquartered.
Just so everybody knows, we share an alma mater is why I asked the question. Leonard, do you have anything you want to add in that area? Not the college.
Oh my goodness. I went to Carleton, so I'm surrounded by two Olies, but doesn't that just show we can get along despite our differences?
Absolutely.
It's a good thing we didn't know that early on, though, Leonard. We liked you, and then we found out you went to Carleton.
Yeah, I might have been blocked early on, so thank you for not doing that. But so, yeah, and I'm looking at Amanda's note, and here's the thing, is it potentially good? I think it's potentially good, but look, if I'm going to stereotype, we as PR practitioners, we are all good listeners. I don't think we could succeed without that. And I think what causes me stress is, there's too much talking. There is virtually no listening going on, let alone attempt to understand in the discussions these days. And I'm not sure what the solution is, other than, I don't know, if we can apply our practitioner brains to see, is there a better way we can communicate that would encourage listening rather than, people sort of forming the response in their heads and digging in their heels. So yeah, Amanda, I'm optimistic. I think there is potential for good, but yeah, I think we can all agree it's pretty difficult these days.
Well, we have hit the end of our time. I'm sorry to say you were all phenomenal. So I was absolutely right that you'd be great panelists, and I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to be on this call with you, or this webinar. You have been just terrific. So thank you for contributing to today. I hope we stay in touch over time, and I encourage people to reach out to any of these people if you have any personal questions you want to ask that didn't get asked today, because I'm sure they would be willing to do that. But you have been terrific participants. I thank you for your time. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jason.
Unmuting. Hello, everyone again. I echo what Dave just said. Fascinating discussion. Thank you all for making the time and joining us today. Just to wrap this up, a quick reminder that the Minnesota PRSA annual meeting and Christmas holiday party will be next month. Dave's nodding his head. I think there will be more information coming about that. I personally find that to be one of my favorite events of the year. And so I hope I'll see most or all of you there. Also a reminder that this again is PRSA Midwest District Week. Hope many of you have your passes and will be joining us for other events on Zoom throughout the week. If not, you still can do so by going to the district's website and moving forward that way. Still another 2.5 days of good sessions and happy hours and networking types of things and all. So a really good week of programming. And again, thank you not just to those from Minnesota, but also from around the district that have joined us today. Details of, again, on that holiday party will be posted soon on Minnesota PRSA's website. That wraps this up. I'm going to stop recording, and we will call it there. Thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.